UFC Vegas 88, of course, definitely a big downgrade from just having UFC 299. But here we are. There are some takeaways, especially with the main event and Tai Tuivasa. Before I get into the main event fight, I want to talk about the context beforehand. Tuivasa had a lot on his plate, a lot of pressure going into this fight, losing 3 in a row. He can't be losing 4. This isn't the first time Tuivasa has come into a bout on a 3-fight losing streak. And the last time it happened, he went on to win 5 in a row, ending with the Derek Lewis knockout. His stock couldn't be any higher. He was on fire, and he got a main event spot in France against Ciryl Gane. And even though he lost that fight and eventually got pieced up in the end, he got his licks in too. Ciryl Gane admitted he got knocked out for a split second in that fight. So of course, that was the first loss of this losing streak, but at this point in time, after the Ciryl Gane fight, his stock didn't take a big hit. But then this is when he made a huge mistake. He rushed into a fight with Sergey Pavlovich. Now, 3 months is already a quick turnaround, but to do it after you just had a war with Ciryl Gane and took a lot of damage, that's a problem. And against the guy in Pavlovich, who is a monster. You just got beat up by an elite striker in Gane, and now you're going to a dominant knockout artist in Pavlovich. And his main reason was really just to get a fight before Christmas so he can have that Christmas break. And then he got knocked out in under a minute. And of course, you could say that could have happened anyways, but rushing into it definitely didn't help. And then we go into the Volkov fight. He was putting damage on. He got taken down, but then got back up. But then as the fight went on, things got sloppier, got taken down again, and he couldn't get up and got finished. Then we get to UFC Vegas 88, and even at this point in time, you can say, look, Tuivasa fought the toughest of toughest competition in Gane, in Pavlovich. Volkov's no easy out. So it's fair to say, you know what? You lost to some of the top guys. Now is your time to come back. And prior to the fight, Tuivasa said, look, I needed to take some time off to recover. I had a torn meniscus. I had a lot of injuries in camp and against Volkov, so I want to be fully healthy going into this fight. So he's at a proper camp. He's back with his OG team. This is that time for him to kind of get back on the win column, especially since he's kind of been through this before when he lost 3 in a row in the past. Now, I don't know if he was planting the seeds already before the fight, but he did say being in America, he never really gets used to that time difference, and he does struggle with it. Now, I don't know how much that plays a factor into his fighting. I'm not sure, but you know, it's just a note. Maybe he kind of didn't feel great going into this fight because he was saying this before the fight. Then when he was getting wrapped up before his walkout, people noticed that there was Taco Bell in the cupboard. And I don't know if it was his or his team's, but knowing Tuivasa and his personality, it just isn't a good look to have Taco Bell right behind you as you're getting wrapped up before your fight. Now we get into the fight, and early on, Tuivasa looked good. He clipped Tybura early, and it looked like this could be a Tuivasa finish. But then after not being able to get that early knockout, Tuivasa was still swinging heavy and losing balance. That then led to him getting grabbed against the fence, then taken down, and then Tybura had his back, and he just couldn't get out. It didn't even look like he was trying to get a technical escape. And then he gets finished, and you can visibly see the frustration. Like, he was so angry. He wanted this so bad. He wanted to get back on the win column. He wanted to get that streak going again. And it's just 4 in a row now that he's lost. And the last 2 losses, he just couldn't get up. He wasn't really moving to transition. He wasn't really trying much escapes. And then we start to question, you've lost 4 in a row. You haven't shown too much improvement. You're still kind of the same fighter. Is this just who you are? You're the scrapper, kind of like in that bottom half of the heavyweight division. And it sucks because for me and a lot of us, we love Tuivasa and what he brings to the UFC in the fight game. And how much can he change and rejuvenate himself to get back into contention? Do we just put him in the fun fight category? He hasn't been able to beat the best strikers in his division, and grapplers just control him. And I've seen people say put him in BKFC and he'd be fantastic there, but I don't think he should leave the UFC, and I don't want him to leave the UFC. Now, Tuivasa, of course, was a huge storyline for UFC Vegas 88, but let's move on to Bryan Battle versus Loosa, which had a lot of drama. Of course, if you saw the fight, Battle early on was piecing up Loosa very technically. It was beautiful to watch. And then Battle eye pokes Loosa, and it looked like a fairly clean eye poke. And Loosa was, of course, struggling and talking to the doctors. And you have 5 minutes to talk. And within about, I think, 2 minutes, he said, I can't see. And that's pretty much the signal for the doctor and the ref to be like, all right, we're stopping this fight. If you can't see, it's over. And of course, Battle in his head was thinking, and even said it after, I was beating your ass. So you took the easy way out. Because now, instead of a loss, you get a no contest. I'm not going to accuse Loosa of that because I've seen him fight before. He's a dog, and eye pokes are serious, right? You don't want to fight if your vision is blurred in any way. And he said he couldn't see. And for Battle, it's like, you had your fingers up. You're the one that eye poked him. Of course, I understand why he's pissed, but it's like, you made the mistake. But then what makes you question it is afterwards when Battle was talking smack to Loosa, and then they get kind of into a little scuffle, and Loosa saying, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill you. And then it's like, where was that energy before? And I have to admit, the smack talk from Battle afterwards was perfect.
I'm that dude. That That's what happens when dudes get in the cage with me. If he wants to run it back, I'll run it back anywhere, anytime. I'll run it back next week. I don't give a f.
It hyped me up to want to see him again, whether it's a rematch or not. But in terms of the actual fight itself, it sucked to see because it was about to be a great performance and then now the fight's over. But moving on though, at some point during this event, it was reported that Jose Aldo is coming back to fight at UFC 301 in Brazil. This is a much needed addition to a UFC 301 card that was lacking some star power. This is exactly what was needed. And of course, it would have been even better if Dominic Cruz was the opponent. But nonetheless, just having Jose Aldo back is going to be a huge bump for the event. But it is a little weird because he was retired and of course inducted into the Hall of Fame already. But I don't know, who cares? It's a fight game. Then we move on to the OSP fight. And this was, for the first 2 rounds, a sleeper. Like, this was just one punch at a time, not too much damage. Really boring for a fight that you thought could end early because these two guys got the power to knock each other out. But what was crazy though was how heavy of a favorite Kennedy was. They said like minus 600 going into the fight. Are you insane? I'm like, with 2 guys who could knock each other out, how could you put one guy at minus 600? I was thinking in my head, I'm like, this is crazy. And then what we saw afterwards proved that. Because the first 2 rounds were so close, I didn't even know how to score it. And then the 3rd round was back and forth. Kennedy gets dropped. And then they're going wild at each other finally. So although the first 2 rounds were super boring, at least the last 5 minutes delivered. I saw people saying going into that 3rd round, bet OSP, because he was still the underdog. And now, of course, we see Kennedy should not have been that much of a favorite. Then we go to Christian Rodriguez versus Dulgarian. And this was interesting because Dulgarian really controlled so much of this fight, but at the same time, didn't do much damage to Christian Rodriguez. And then you look at that 3rd round, Rodriguez is not only dominating and controlling, but also landing some damage on Dulgarian. And I'm thinking, look, maybe Dulgarian, just because of his control time throughout the first 2 rounds, is going to win. And then by my surprise, the judges gave it to Christian Rodriguez. And there was a lot of talk about this and discussion about the score criteria, etc., because Dulgarian didn't land much damage with his control. Ultimately, I'm fine with the result because Christian Rodriguez was putting it on him in that last round. Now, moving on, we find out that Bo Nickal is now going to be the opener of the main card for UFC 300 instead of a spot above Charles Oliveira. I've seen a lot of debate about this online. Bo Nickal shouldn't even be on the main card, shouldn't be above Charles Oliveira. Now, there's a UFC side to this where they want to boost up Bo Nickal and his brand. And you can argue the opening spot for the main card is a bigger slot than the fight after. But the thing is, Bo Nickal is such a heavy favorite, that's what's turning people off. If you put him against a real contender or a fight that's way more even, then you could say, okay, put Bo Nickal on the main card. We don't want to see Bo Nickal on the main card of UFC 300 when he's like a minus 1400 favorite. So I think that's the missing piece. It's not just him and the placement, but it's the matchup. Moving on, Meerschaert gets the finish against Barberena, which now ties Anderson Silva's record for most finishes in middleweight history. It's a pretty cool feat, and it just like makes you wonder, like, man, Meerschaert, he's been here for a while and he just keeps sticking around. He keeps doing some work no matter what. Then we go to Davis versus Levy, and I'm just happy Davis finished the fight, because if I had to see him hold on and slowly try to get submissions for like another 15 minutes, I'm like, bro, if you're gonna dominate this much, just please finish the fight. But good on him for showcasing that jiu-jitsu. Then we go to Filho versus Osbourne, and Filho able to figure out to get the same submission Osbourne just lost to in his last fight. You'd think after a loss to a rear naked choke, that's the one thing you're gonna be like, okay, that's not gonna happen again. And then it happens again. Filho saw the footage and said, I'm going to do the same submission, but do it faster. It was super impressive. He was pretty much perfect. Then we go to arguably the best fight of the night, which is Culibao versus Silva. And I thought Silva could have finished this fight early. He clips Culibao, but then starts to grapple and goes for a submission instead of just trying to pile on some more punches first. The reason being, if you got someone dazed like that, maybe try to get the knockout. But he didn't and used up a lot of energy. And starting that 2nd round, Culibao was really getting his rhythm, getting some good shots off. That being said, Silva did finish the round well with some big shots in the takedown. Then that 3rd round was a crazy back and forth, and the pressure of Danny Silva just constantly going forward. But the difference was Culibao was able to fight moving backwards and forwards, and that helped him a lot. Amazing fight. This honestly should have been higher up on the card. Then we go to Amorim, who had a great finish against McKenna. And it was funny because the commentary mentioned that McKenna was working really heavy on wrestling, and they were saying, maybe you shouldn't have, because if you take Amorim down, you could get submitted. And that's exactly what happened. What was crazy though was the ref stopping and then starting the fight again. I didn't even know that was allowed, but luckily it didn't make a difference. Then we go to Moises versus Ramirez, and it was really cool to see him not just dominate, but get the finish by leg kick. It just goes to show some fighters have better poker faces than others, but leg kicks do real damage. Those are my biggest takeaways from UFC Vegas 88. Let me know what you guys think, especially about the Tuivasa stuff. I really want to hear your thoughts and what to do next with them. Overall, the card, honestly, wasn't that great. There were some good fights, but man, I missed those pay-per-views. These fight nights, really make you miss those stacked up pay-per-views, but it also makes those pay-per-views, worth it and make you even more hyped up. So it kind of goes both ways. Anyways, let me know your thoughts, guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Peace.